Coming up next in the featherweight division, we have Steve Garcia taking on my boy Melk Costa. For Steve Garcia, he has had a definitely interesting UFC career where a lot of people probably know him from the Chase Hooper fight. A lot of people probably had Chase Hooper in your bets and your parlays, whatever, when they did fight. And Steve Garcia was the guy who busted those for you. So he definitely busted them for Rick and I back when they fought. An interesting thing for me, he has 3-2 in the UFC with losses to Luis Pena as well as Mahashate, but he also beat Chepe Mariscal in the LFA, which was his final fight heading into the UFC, which I think is interesting. Like, he has some interesting names on his resume, which means that he's not just going to be some walk in the park for my boy Costa here. So I am a big fan of Costa. I wrote about him in the January pay-per-view that he was on. I believe he was on the Jamal Hill card against Glover Teixeira when Jamal won the belt. Shout out to the true champion. But I think Garcia is a really tough test for him, where we saw it against Chase Hooper. We saw it against some other guys for Garcia. I did end up referencing those UFC 283 notes a bit when I was looking at my Costa tape. And for me, the reason why I like him so much is how much of a dynamic striker he is. And that's what stood out from when we've watched him fight, as well as from when I previewed that fight almost a year ago now, is how much this guy just loves to stand and bang. He is going to throw. He's going to sit in the pocket, and he's not going to let you back him down. And if you do start to back him down, he's going to find the holes and then just start walking you down. The issue for me is he has that lack of ground game, which I think Steve Garcia might be able to exploit, as well as there is some times where he shows a lack of creativity, where you kind of know when and what he's going to throw. I do think that this matchup heavily favors him against Garcia, where it's not like Garcia has some exquisite ground game that's going to take advantage of Costa. And I do think that he holds that striking advantage where he's going to be able to really piece up Garcia. But Garcia is not going to go down without a really gross, disgusting fight. So I'm really excited to watch this. What do you have, Rick, on this one?
Yeah, this should be one of the more entertaining fights of the night. And to your point, I mean, it's Steve Garcia. Most of their styles just match up for entertainment. Garcia's had some mixed results throughout his career. I know you mentioned the on his name right now, pulling it up, the Chepe Mariscal victory, but he also lost by split decision to Ricky Tercios back in Bellator. So he's had some mixed results before his time to the UFC, and really it's been the same trend in the UFC. He's got some good offensive wrestling, but he's not going to want to use it in this fight because Costa's pretty slippery on the ground. And on the feet, he's long. His boxing combinations are long. And he likes to sort of squat as he goes in and then launch out of it, sort of like a frog in a way, if you think of frog. And it gives him extra reach, but it also makes him extend himself out to where he can get clocked. And that's exactly what happened in the Mahashate loss, where he was slept over just over a minute in the fight. But he's a dog. He's going to get in there. He's going to be able to throw hooks, and that length is able to clip guys. The Shailon Nurdenbeke fight was an interesting fight where he ended up winning via a liver punch in the second round as an underdog. But in that first round, he was almost knocked out 1 minute in. He got hit as clean as anyone get hit, got dropped, and then was getting ground and pounded and out wrestled. But then he stood up and said, all right, let's go, and then took it to Nurdenbeke, almost finished him in the first round, finished him at the beginning of the second round. And so impressive to see that grit in him. Costa, same way. He came in on short notice in his UFC debut, as you mentioned, looked good against Thiago Silva, didn't get the dub. But then he came back and fought Austin Lingo. And that's a fight that told me a lot about how this fight's going to go. Because Austin Lingo, if you haven't seen him before, if you haven't watched him, he is like Drew Dober without the aggressiveness of Drew Dober. He can take a punch and he can just keep taking your shots until eventually, Drew Dober gets slept these days, but the amount of body kicks that he took in that fight to the calf, straight kicks up the middle, stomps, everything to every level should have dropped any man. There were times where Lingo was sitting there just cringing, but he wouldn't go down because he's Austin Lingo and he's made of bricks. But the cardio of Costa and the relentless wrestling of Costa could be the difference in this fight. If he's able to mix it up, I think he'll be able to get Garcia on the ground if he needs to. And he's one of those guys that is able to blend his skills together well. And so if he can start to really see success with the kicks, especially to the body, that really opens up the head kicks, and he can hit those clean. And he's good at recognizing that. So I think he's got many different ways to win this fight. And he can also hit those counter punches on when guys rush into. So he's gotten many different paths to victory in this one. And I really don't like how many times Garcia has gotten clipped in the past. This sort of feels like one of those fights for Costa where you're rewarded for that initial fight against Thiago Santos. This is a little bit of a step up, but enough of one to where you continue to build that hype behind you. So I think he's one guy that's going to be here for the future. And at just 27 years of age, I think that Costa is going to be here for a while. So I've got Costa. I've got no bet on it at the moment. The odds are sort of going back and forth. Costa's about minus 230 right now, depending on where you look. Andy, you got any bets on this fight?
So I'm going Costa as my pick, and I'm going Costa in a parlay piece, which I'll touch on later in the card. So I'm with you. You can't just take a minus 230 guy straight up unless you feel absolutely confident that it's going to hit. I'm okay with doing that once every now and again, but this isn't necessarily one that you should be doing that with once every now and again. I think it's a fantastic parlay piece, though, and that's the way that I'm going to go. So Rick and I both have Mr. Melky Costa himself, and we are now going to head into the next fight on the lightweight division with Joe Selecki taking on Drakkar Klose. So stay with us, and we will preview the next fight. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Pilsners and Prelims, a UFC betting podcast by Happy Hour Sports. Just want to ask if you could like and subscribe to the video if you like the content that we're putting out, and be sure to stay tuned to what we have coming up in the future. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the other side.